Let's give George a hand, everybody. Give him a hand out, they lose their mind.
It's working. So,
all right.
I handed out a couple things. So since the last time I met you guys, we've raised rates 2 times on some on our products. So you know what? It's a response to where we are in the interest rate cycle, but more importantly, in response to our competition. So, and why I say the second part is because the products themselves, they do sell themselves, right? But we also want to make sure that we're cutting edge and we're at the top of the game. And that's a commitment we make to you. We've always made that commitment. If the numbers don't support that, we're going to back off and be cautious, because 2008 was a pretty scary time for most of you, right? How many people were in the business back then? I mean, you saw the Dow going down 500 points every day. It's a bigger deal then than it is today. Why? Where's the Dow today? Let's call it 2,400 or 24,000, 25,000. Where was it back then? We're fastly cruising down to 6,500. So 500-point difference in a day there was a big deal. And then we went into a long period of interest rate environment where it was just going to be low for long and so forth. Part of the presentation, I'm going to have a full-blown CE session that's coming out very shortly. You'll see it at a roadshow, the ones that I do over here in Oak Brook and so forth. The truth about annuities. What do they really hedge against? And I just got to rewind on the last 10 years. Did you think that we'd be in an interest rate environment where the CDs would still be below 1%? No. I mean, it also hedged against, forget about the equity risk, the interest rate risk. Because you went from a 5% CD down to 1% or less. That's an 80% decline. The market's melted down by 80%. What do you think people do? Start shooting. The anarchy on the street. And if we stayed at 6,500 on the Dow, what do you think would have happened to people's retirement income? So I'm gonna come back to a key phrase. It's about the cash flow, not the cash pile. So in all the products you see out in the street, anniversary resets, quarterly, and so forth. In concept, they're all great products. But if you're trying to eke out the biggest number for your client, you got to look at several different things. But we'll kind of get back to that in a second. So this is a presentation I did last Friday, and going a little low tech here, because I get a little bit more discretion when I do it this way. This is like me using a whiteboard, so I don't have to run it through compliance. So we're going to start out with the truth about annuities. We wrote an article. It was by our head of our advanced markets area, and basically, how many people know the name Ken Fisher? How many people like Ken Fisher? Nobody, right? Why? Because he discredits you equally as much as he discredits us. He says the 10 reasons why you shouldn't buy an annuity. He lumps all the concepts together. And what do you think those concepts are? Illiquidity? Not true, because you could buy a C-share annuity. He's referring to a SPIA. You guys make a ton of money on the commission. Is that true?
No.
Not really, because especially in the securities world, because these aren't, some of them are insurance products and some are not. So in the securities world, they are capped as the length of how much we can give in commission. The surrender charge periods, they'll lump in 15-year surrender charges as an example. One way you're saying there's no liquidity, here you're saying 15 years. Again, they're hybriding all these little concepts in together. Limited growth, what do you think he's referring to? A fixed annuity, right? It's just something in general that just has an interest rate tie. And with interest rates being so low, you can't afford to give that much out there, So those companies that would offer, say, a 4% fixed annuity versus a 2%, what do you think the shape of that company looks like?
Yeah, not good.
Yeah, it's subpar. It's going to be buying a junk bond. You may be the largest shareholder. Right? So this is the case. The balance sheet of this fixed annuity company was only about $15 million. The client was going to invest $3 million.
Oh, wow.
They would have been the largest shareholder in that company. It's a general account item, not protected from creditors. So, all the things that he says. But here's the phrase I come back to that nobody or he cannot say. Is we make promises that he can't keep. So you may pay a little bit more of a premium for it, but you're paying for insurance on your portfolio. So, I kind of want to refer to, and this is going to be in the body of what I'm going to hit in a little bit, but if you just pull this up, this is the piece I'm going to put around. All 3 of these portfolios average 7%. And if you look at the columns on the left, on the right-hand side, and let's just take like Mr. Jones, average 7%. At the end of this, from age 41 to 65, what's the total portfolio value?
5.4 million.
Now, you got basically, he hit it on the right side of the equation. Basically, you average 7% in the middle portfolio. It's basically had a couple losses early on versus a couple gains early on. Where did they end up?
About the same.
Yeah, 7% straight. And the markets, do they produce 7% straight every year? No. This is what creates emotion. You know, when markets are down a given quarter, a given year, then what do investors do? They panic, right? So it's a big deal. You know, and they make the wrong decision at the worst time. And where do you think investors are today? They're in a place where they want risk on. Too many people are making money. You haven't been here in the last several years. The opportunity has left you. You know, so if you were making 1% at the bank, stay with it, because now's not the time for you. You know, it was several years ago, and then that's when you got out and you missed a run. So when we're 320% off the bottom, what's the next direction this thing's going to go? I always say protect it before you lose it, not after you lose it. So, you know, here's a couple questions you need to write down. And you know what? The markets have made substantial gains in the last 10 years. We're at the single longest market run since the Great Depression. What are we going to do with some of the profits that we've earned in our 401k, our other investments, to protect those profits? Just put it back on them. What's your plan? Go forward. They don't have a plan. Why don't we take some of that market risk off the table, i.e. still retain the risk, if you will, but with only upside as it pertains to future cash flow. And again, when I say these things are about cash flow versus the cash pile, that's what this article refers to. Where else are you going to be able to generate 5+% guaranteed for life? So I'm going to kind of finish off this piece. If you flip it over on the other side where the numbers kind of start to deviate away from each other, again, these are 3 different portfolios averaging 7%, and then you start taking the distribution. Well, basically at the end of that, from 65 to, let's say, 90, portfolio A has $1.1 million in it. Portfolio B, which is the bottom set of lines, basically has nothing left. And the one that earns 7% consistently had $500,000. What's the point on this? In accumulation, sequence of return isn't as much of a factor as it is in distribution. Because if you take 5 or 6% today, that's not anything you have in your portfolio for recovery on a go-forward basis. It's missing capital. But whereas if you are sitting inside your accumulation, you have a market loss, you have all that money to still participate. So to give you an example, let's put the numbers. If you have a 20% correction in the market, which is fairly typical, your client's going to experience several of these over the course of a 30-year distribution. Well, you're taking 4% out, let's say, versus nothing. If I have a 20% correction, how much do I need to get back to even if I take no money out of the account? 20% correction, it's 25 to get back to even, because you only got on 100,000, 80 working for you. Well, if you're taking, say, 4% out, well, for the next 3 years, if you keep taking that 4% out for 3 years, you have to get 42% before you get back to even. So 25 minus 42. See how it grows on you exponentially? So, you know, this is where the industry isn't really prepared to adequately address the distribution side of the equation. This is a big experiment at the end of the day, don't you think? I mean, we can rely on past history to kind of give us a guideline as to what's that safe withdrawal rate. And I'll kind of hit some of the withdrawal risk here. We kind of talked a little bit about accumulation risk and withdrawal risk, but here's what, if you take one thing away from this at all, is that safe withdrawal rate, it's a moving target. It's what it is. When we talk about the retirement red zone, you guys have heard that phrase? That 5 years before retirement, you can't afford a 2008. More importantly, you can't afford 2001 and 2. Those are over 40% corrections 2 times in a 10-year period. So But it's the it's the length and time of recovery. We were very fortunate with the last correction, and all things being as worse as they were. Equally, it was the best situation for the markets and somebody that was in distribution, because the recovery was so dramatic. It was 320% in less than 10 years. Most of it was recovery, you know, basically. I mean, so peak to trough, we're off about 60%. But you know, so let's get back to the withdrawal rate, safe withdrawal rate. 4% used to be the norm. Nobody ever used it because when it came into play, it was back in the 90s. And what were the markets doing in the late 90s? I know you know.
Very good.
Yeah, it's 5 years. The S&P's doing over 20%, almost 25. You came to a client and said, you want to take 4% is kind of the number. What do you think they would say? I'm not buying it. You know what? The guy down the street says 7. He can get me through retirement. Probably if retirement only lasts 10 years. But now we got to count for 40, 30 years. I mean, that's a different number. So, you know, and I go back to, and I say this all the time in my presentations. 96 is when I got in the business, or roughly 90s. It's probably, that's when I started with Pro. So the 10-year treasury was 8.1%. Safest investment. Here, take 4. It's half. You know, nobody's buying it. I'm not buying it.
Yeah.
You know, so it's all relative. And if you could fast forward to today, and you told me back then that CD rates would be below 1%, the 10-year treasury maybe getting close to 3. You know, at that point, I would have said no. You know, I probably wouldn't have believed that the Dow would be at 24,000 though either. So just a lot of the unthinkables have happened. So when you can anchor down and protect somebody's retirement, you know, this is well worth that 1% that you're going to pay. I mean, without doubt, because it's portfolio insurance. When you run out of money, it's okay. This is where the credit quality of the insurance company kind of comes into it. And you're exactly right. You know, and I have to give Prue a little bit of a plug here because it's a 135-year-old company. We've been hedging risk for investors for over 135 years. This is just another way that we hedge risk for needs that people have. And they're needs that they don't even know they have. In the best sales presentations, I always said in the past was, make them recognize the problems they don't even know they have. And then you solve for it. You know, these are like a simple thing like this. You know, 3 portfolios averaging 7%. One has no money, one has $1 million, and one has $500,000. Those are 3 big differences. And then we've made a shift when we start going into the distribution side. If the same scenario happened with those 3 portfolios, you ended up at the same place. So we're pivoting, we're entering into a new set of risk, if you will. Let's see, we've kind of talked about markets a little bit, but let me just kind of hit on that. On average, your clients are going to face 5 market corrections over the course of a 30-year period, historically speaking. On average, there'll be about 33% in losses, and they'll last about 14 months. So you might survive in distribution the first one. You might survive the second. The third might be questionable, depends on what happens over the next 15 years or so. Probably by the 4th, you've got a good indication that you may not even make it 30 years. And then what's your backup plan? You're 85 years old. And it's not going back to work, right? So, you know, that's really market risk. And you can't put a framework around what's going to happen 10, 15 years later down the road. So, I mean, if you could, you'd be able to adjust the portfolio to absorb those kind of shock waves. So the one thing I can tell you, though, you can't go to all fixed income today, right? Because it doesn't yield you anything. So basically, you might as well put it in the bank and just collect off the cash, you know, and just drain it down. You can't do that. You can't go all fixed income. You can't go all equities either, because where are we today? You are in the middle of the perfect storm. And this is basically where it's going to get tough on you guys. So, and then you take someone's retirement nest egg and, you know, the next 10, 15 years, you know, if it doesn't work out, what happens? At least with something like this, don't worry about it. We're still going to get you your predicted cash flow. You take the goose egg out of it. And the goose egg is when you run out of money. And I think, and I truly believe this, when you start lining all these factors up, a lot of these contracts that we put in place will probably end up in a 0 range over the course of 30 years. Especially when you get joint annuities. And And here's where the article kind of comes in, and this is a big point that we'll make when the CE session rolls out, is, and it'll become a client-approved seminar, and that's something you may entertain, dovetail it into, you know, like the Social Security 202 or something
Sure,
like that.
sure.
But taking an IRA, typically, does a husband and wife each have an IRA?
Yeah.
Probably. Are they equal in value?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Usually it's disjointed. You can take these products and make them joint IRAs simply by putting a joint rider on it. So it's his IRA or her IRA. She's got 700,000 or he's got 700,000. The other spouse has 200. The other spouse has 200. I can take both those, the 700 and 200, protect both lives. When the first spouse passes, the second spouse takes over, and it's still their IRA. So now it becomes a joint retirement program. And these things, there's not an investment out there that does that.
Yeah.
So, you know, this is where you can make that bridge happen. So when you talk to a compliance department, like, yeah, I know that's a little bit more expensive, and I know you don't like the fact that we're going to use an annuity, but here's all the factors. But here's the number one factor. I'm taking that IRA and I'm making it income for 2 lives. I can't find another investment out there. I can't buy gold and do it. I can't do it in an IRA alone. I can't do it in a 401k. So those are the provisions that these kind of contracts allow me to do. So does that make sense?
Yes, yes, it does.
It's very subtle, but man, how powerful is that? Now, the other second part of this is, coming back to the safe withdrawal rate, is what is the safe withdrawal rate? I'll let you guys tell me. Is it 2? Is it 3? Is it 4? 3.5? All right, well, let's work with 3.5, because most experts are going to say less than 3 today. Like I say, it's a moving target. You know what? 5 years from now, somebody's going to say 7. You know, 3 years from now, somebody's going to say 1.5. Who knows? 3.5. You reach 70.5. What do you have to do at 70.5 with most of this money?
Distribution.
RMD.
RMDs. What's that percentage at 70.5?
Isn't it about 4, isn't it?
4 or 5. Yeah, around
A little over 4?
3.65%.
Okay, all right.
So what happens year over year though?
It keeps going up.
It keeps going up. So let's say we said 3.5. What's the safe withdrawal rate? Is that before fees or after fees?
It's after fees.
Yeah. Okay. So then you would have to accommodate for fees. You know. So it's really not 3.5. It's probably a little bit more. But let's just work with in a vacuum, no fees. 3.5 today, 3.65 at 70.5. The government's going to trump your plan. By 73, you're at 4.05%, and as the number goes up, you'll be over 5 and 6 and 7 and so forth. So you can't control that safe withdrawal rate. It's going to be controlled for you. So when you line this argument up, if you will, and I'm not saying it's an argument, it's the facts. When we talk about the truth about annuities, what is that safe withdrawal rate? We're able to give it to you. We're able to give it to you in a higher format, guaranteed 5, 5.5, or even in some cases 6 for life, and it's RMD friendly. So if you have to take more than what the guarantee supports, you get that, or the guarantee. So if the guarantee is less than the RMD, you're going to get it. So if you were in a standard mutual fund account, 401k, whatever the case may be, and you had to accommodate, and you run out of money, there's no backup provision. The account value is just lost. So that's where it's a simple concept. I've had people sell millions of it, and they go, "Oh yeah, I forgot about that." You know, that's why when they say, you know, Ken Fisher would say, "What? Why are you putting money inside a qualified plan, or qualified money inside an annuity when it's already tax deferred?" Well, we're not selling it for tax deferral. What are we selling it for? The insurance is the program. So, now I'll kind of back in a little bit, kind of building off of what we did late last year or earlier this year. When you sit down with a client, here's what